Good morning. This is Hamdan Alshamsi, and joining me is Mohamed Yasin from Hamdan Alshamsi Lawyers and Legal Consultants. We thank everybody for showing up today, and we thank the Youth Hub and its team and Badur Abdul Jabbar for having organized this and making this happen. We have a series of presentations that aims to assist entrepreneurs, assist the Youth Hub members in their ventures and businesses. So these are the speakers of today. It's myself and Mohamed Yasin. We'll be speaking about pre-disputes and disputes, a general overview really of how they work and what people should know about them. So I'll explain a little bit about the firm before we move on to Mohamed Yasin. The firm has been established in 2011. We have a wide range of industries we work with. And it's a full-fledged law firm that deals with DIFC disputes, with UAE disputes, and also provides advisory, transactional, and corporate work. So the course will be a 10-day course and workshop, which we hope to get a lot of questions from you, where we will explain the basic elements of the law and how entrepreneurs can understand the law, the basic elements of the law. And we'll be joined by the UAE Space Agency to explain what is happening with the agency and with the industry of space. And we hope that the youth and entrepreneurs in the next following years will look into developing and joining the industry, the space industry, that is. However, over the next 10 days as well, there will be interesting presentations about licensing, setting up, disputes, which we'll talk about today, and important legal issues and concepts that we hope the youth and entrepreneurs will learn and apply to their businesses. So I'll move on to Mohamed Yasin, who will give the first presentation of today.
Thank you, Hamdan. So I would like to talk a little bit about the role of lawyers before disputes. And the reason I would like to do that is many people believe that a role of a lawyer is usually starts after a dispute comes into being. And that is a misconception. All successful people, businesses, and people who manage to avoid risk have involved lawyers early on in any matter that they need consulting on. Most matters that we cover and we've seen usually happen, usually cause problems and for our clients if they come in too late. And this is why we thought this would be useful for young people and entrepreneurs to understand and know that there is help available before you embark on a long journey. So the first step that lawyers help clients with is planning. Anything that can range from the ideation stage, the business plan drafting, the strategy, and trying to think about the area in which or the sector that the idea or the project will be in. A lawyer can pitch in and help manage expectations, help you plan with the legal risks and try to find ways to mitigate them early on in the process and identify the costs associated with these with the mitigation of such risks, if at all. Understand the feasibility of the project itself. When it comes to structuring, after the planning stage and the plan is ready to be implemented, there are many ways to execute a plan, and the legal advice is very important at that stage, as it can help manage the liabilities and obligations of the investors, the shareholders, the employees, and allow the entrepreneur or the people involved to look at different risk profiles and different ways of implementation and different costs when it comes to the plan. And you have then an element for contracting, which we believe is important to talk about because from the beginning of the planning stage and the structuring, you will be needing to contract with various parties, from employees to people who are doing your marketing, to people who are doing your public relation services, to people who are doing your IT, buying equipment for your office if needed, laptops, whatever. All these things have terms and conditions and that need to be looked at and are subject to regulation in the UAE. And so it is very advisable to have a lawyer involved in terms of trying to look at these various contracting needs. And many lawyers, especially at our offices, we offer help for different industries and different sizes of businesses that make sense from a fee point of view. And we definitely don't advise that you go ahead and sign any contract without understanding it. The problem with that is that you might be signing up to obligations that you might not be able to practically meet, as well as you might be giving the other party many rights that could be unfair to your business or could impact the feasibility or profitability of your business or increase even the risk of the whole transaction. So that's how important contracting is. And then on an ongoing basis, you have the updating and adapting role. At least the lawyer would be updating and you would be adapting in that sense. Updating you on regulations that change. We have witnessed in the COVID-19 outbreak and pandemic that a lot of regulations came into being, especially when it comes to employment law, especially when it comes to licensing. And a lot of clients were not up to date with that, and so we have helped a lot of clients navigate through these difficult times by helping them understand and being up to date with that. And many of our clients were have successfully managed to pivot and adapt to the COVID-19 pandemic and the pressures that are created by such pandemic, because they understood the law. And we always, you cannot emphasize this enough, that you must consult with your lawyer. If you just need an initial consultancy, it will not be a huge cost on the business, and it's very advisable that you at least know the general, get a general guidance on any issue that you're facing. So that's in terms of the roles of lawyers before disputes. As you can see, that you have a lot that you can consult with with your legal counsel, and a lot that you might be leaving out in terms of manageable risk if you don't. And with that, I will be taking questions at the moment. My colleague Jasmine will be reading questions from the audience now.
Thank you so much for that, Mohamed Yasin. We do have a few questions from the audience. The first one is, should I sign a contract for everything I do?
That's a very good question. So not necessarily, because contracts can be inferred from verbal agreements. It is just good practice to evidence them in writing, whether in email or in an invoice or in a quotation that is signed. Ideally, for anything above a few thousand dirhams should be done in a contract, a fully fledged contract. That's what I would recommend. It's different from sector to sector. What is the norm in each business sector? There are different practices. It is very useful to sit with a lawyer and try and understand what is the norm for your sector, and try to see that you are practicing using the best practices of that particular sector.
Thank you very much for that. The next question we have is, what if I sign the contract but later on change my mind?
Contracts are usually there to avoid people changing their minds, at least arbitrarily. And so they would ideally have a provision governing termination if they were drafted correctly. Alternatively, a court can decide whether the contract can be terminated, and it can rule to terminate it on behalf of the parties if they meet certain criteria. But do consult with us if you have a specific case, and we can help you navigate through it.
Great, thank you so much for that. And our last question is, how do I know if the lawyer I hire is good? Aren't lawyers expensive?
Yes, good two questions. Lawyers, I suppose they're not as expensive as one might think, depending on what a person or a client needs. In terms of short, quick consultancies, I think that these are within reach of most young people, entrepreneurs, and people with limited income. You can get a consultancy and sit with a lawyer for an hour and try to get the lawyer's opinion on a variety of matters in that hour, just to cover your basic points for whatever project or matter that you intend on pursuing. And those can range anything between 1,500 to 3,000, sometimes a little bit above that if the matter is very specialized and there's very few lawyers who understand that specialization. In terms of identifying, or how could you identify if a lawyer is good or not, there are many international and local listings that are known to list lawyers and their rankings and area of expertise. That's one way you can find out if a lawyer is good or a law firm is good. Another way is by comparing, meeting different lawyers and asking for expertise profiles or curriculums, vitae for each of the law firms and the lawyers. They would give you a capability statement of each of their team members, how many years they're experienced. You could ask them to explain in the area that you are interested in finding out more details about. What expertise they have specifically. You can. We advise you to compare law firms' expertise in that area. People do that as well to compare costs versus expertise. And another way is word of mouth and testimonials from other people and clients that we have worked with or the law firms have worked with.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's the end of the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mohamed Yasin, for the information. And I will be explaining about disputes. So we hope that you never enter into a dispute and you don't see a dispute. However, you have to be aware of disputes, just briefly understand disputes as well to avoid them in the best way possible. So what are the role of lawyers? What does this talk about? Well, I'm going to give you a brief understanding about disputes, why they occur, how to avoid them, and also if they do occur, what are you expecting? So, pre-litigation. Question is why we litigate. Of course, here Homer Simpson has found himself in a bad state. He started fist punching with another person. That is not what we want you or anyone to do. It's unprofessional, it's bad for our business, and you would probably end up in jail. So you want to avoid that. The reason why lawyers and the judicial system is there is to resolve disputes between people that are unable to resolve their dispute. So, simply put, there are a lot of kinds of disputes, and generally there is a civil claim, and generally is a civil claim and a criminal claim. Those are how disputes are categorized. And in civil claims, obviously, you have a wide variety of different industries and different ways in which a dispute can be resolved. The most important thing to know as an entrepreneur is that of jurisdiction. This depends really on where you are, where the respondent is, who's the other contracting party, and where the performance of the contract was done. This will determine where you eventually end up resolving the dispute. At which courts is what I mean. You've got the UAE courts, you've got all courts in all Emirates, you've got the DIFC courts, which is a specialized courts for the DIFC area, and then you have arbitrations. Now, you could end up outside the UAE to resolve a dispute if the contracting party is outside and some of the performance was outside. It is important to note that when signing a contract, parties can agree to where the dispute shall be resolved. In the event parties do not agree, the general rule is the place of domicile of the respondent. So if you were in Dubai and you contracted with someone in Sharjah, if the Sharjah company has an issue and they would like to take this to courts, they would most likely have to approach the Dubai courts to litigate. There are arbitrations as well that you should be aware of. Arbitrations are an agreement between parties where they contract and resolve the dispute out of courts. Arbitration agreements must be written in the agreement, and they generally refer to a center. Now, why do people arbitrate, or why should you consider arbitration? That is because sometimes the parties to the dispute want a certain person to resolve their dispute, or certain person with technical knowledge to resolve a dispute. Then comes enforcement. It is important to understand that disputes after you obtain a judgment can be enforced. Now, we have a photo there of a car being picked up, and that is close to what happens, not exactly a car being picked up off the street. This is probably a person who parked wrong. So once you have a judgment, in the UAE, our system of enforcement is very good. You will be able to enforce your judgment and get your money from whatever ruling you have through the courts, if obviously the party is not bankrupt. And now to the criminal law. So there are certain things entrepreneurs have to know about criminal law. You do not want to, and hopefully you'll never see any criminal liability. However, you should know about certain criminal acts that you should be wary of, which is the breach of trust, generally, fraud, forgery, IP crimes, and electronic crimes. So we all know Madoff, obviously, he was involved in a fraud. Of course, fraud is generally needs intent, so you have to have intent of doing fraud. However, I think I want to go to breach of trust because this is an important part of the criminal law that you entrepreneurs should know. Breach of trust is using monies of a company for other than the purpose of a company. This is extremely important when you set up a company and you have partners. The monies of the companies should not be used for personal use, and if they are used for personal use, you should obtain the authorizations. In all events, whenever you use a company's monies or partner's monies, you should obtain the right authorizations from the company and its shareholders. Avoid using companies' monies for your own benefit. Make sure that when you do take or withdraw monies of the companies, it's well documented and recorded why you took them and where you spent it. That's extremely important, especially when you have partners. You have to make sure as well when you set up the companies that you do not copy intellectual property of another company. Intellectual property are trademarks, names, and also patents of other companies. So trademarks are, as you can see here, are well-known logos of companies. And names are obviously the names that you have there. And patents are things that are invented by companies in a specific industry that are protected and you can't use, which are inventions, basically. So as we see here, Mr. Mahmoud set up his McDonald's Mahmoud pizza. That would probably infringe on McDonald's logo, considering that he has the arches of McDonald's. The Buckstar coffee would also most likely infringe on Starbucks' logo. As you see there, it's the same, except that he's changed the name. And Subday is also one of the nice ones where he, nice examples, of infringements where instead of Subway, he's used Subday, and he's put the exact logo of Subway, except that he's changed the way with a day. So these things you need to be careful of. Of course, it's extremely important. You do not infringe on IP rights of others. You could find yourselves in a lawsuit, and also developing a logo or a name that eventually you'll need to change, which is very costly in time and money for you guys. The last thing is electronic crimes. There's a variety of things of that sort. I mean, electronic crimes can be from hacking, from using, IP addresses that are not allowed unless registered, hiding behind IP addresses. However, I think for you guys, it might involve the social media aspect of things, and if anyone is thinking about setting up or being an influencer, or having a company that is involved in the influencer part of the business or industry, you want to avoid electronic crimes. Regulatory disputes. Those are disputes that that involve the government. Now, there's a variety of things, but simply put, they are to do with provision of service and goods. Any person providing services and goods that may harm consumers or cause any loss or liability, you will be responsible for. Therefore, it is extremely important to ensure that your goods don't, and understand how to put the right disclaimers to avoid liability. The next thing is that certain activities are regulated. You want to make sure that you do have a no objection or an agreement or consent from a department that regulates certain activities. As an example, finance, medical are regulated, including the law, including ourselves. Therefore, if you ever are thinking of going into these industries, you must obtain consent. The last but not least is VAT, value-added tax. The UAE has value-added tax, and if you cross the threshold, you must register with the VAT authorities and provide them with your information and also pay your VAT. Costs. What is a cost to litigate? Of course, we've all seen a lot of movies, and yes, it is costly. However, as a general rule, the UAE courts are quite effective. You are looking at legal and court costs of anything between 50,000 dirhams going upwards or less, depending on the dispute. Arbitration is costly because you appoint people with particular knowledge about an industry, but it could cost from 80,000 and above. And then outside courts, it really depends on the jurisdiction and where you are. A lawyer's role in all this, of course, at the time of dispute, I mean, my colleague Mohamed Yasin explained, that you should have good contracts. You should avoid disputes by having agreements written. However, if you end up in a dispute, the role of the lawyers as well is to settle or advise you correctly what is your liability and the expectation of what the judgment could be. This is important because it could avoid further costs in a dispute. You could see yourself settling very quickly. Therefore, reaching out to a lawyer right at the outset is extremely important. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll take them now.
Thank you so much for that, Hamdan. We do have a few questions from the audience. I will just answer a couple of them at the moment. So the first question, how do I know which court will deal with my case? If I sign a contract in Abu Dhabi, will the Abu Dhabi courts deal with my case? I live in Dubai. How can my case be heard in Dubai instead? Right.
That question, has a lot of questions within it. So the general rule, as I said, is it's the domicile of the respondent. That's a general rule, unless you contract or you agree otherwise, with certain exceptions. If you live in Abu Dhabi, however, if you live in Dubai, you mentioned, and your business is in Abu Dhabi, then and your business contracted with Abu Dhabi company and the performance was in Abu Dhabi, then most likely it will be in Abu Dhabi. Through contracts, you can contract for certain courts to be responsible. I hope that answers your question. However, I mean, there are certain exceptions. However, the general rule is where the deal was performed, where the respondent is, the person being sued, where he is, with certain exceptions if parties have already agreed to another jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you for that. And the next question, if I own the company, what should I do if I think someone is acting in a suspicious or in a criminal way? How can I protect myself? What if I get in trouble? Should I say anything?
All right. Well, this happens a lot. It's white-collar crime. People do, it happens in a lot of industries. And I think the best way is good accounting practices, making sure everything's documented, available for the management and for the or for yourself, and ensuring that you reduce the amount of cash transactions, or you regulate how cash is used in the business, with sign-offs and proper accounting policies. It is a day-to-day matter. I've seen clients who come after 1 year and mention that they have a criminal act that has happened. I think the best thing is to resolve it on a day-to-day basis, making sure that you understand, or the management understands, where the money went on a day-to-day basis to avoid liability. If you do have somebody acting suspicious, I think you should go directly to a lawyer, understand quickly what you should do, what evidence you need, to understand what you can do as well to resolve it quickly. Hope that answers the question. I think the question was there's a lot of questions within itself, but I mean, how can you protect yourself as well as part of it? Is really accounting policies. You need to look at accounting policies, make sure things are documented. That's the most important thing, I believe.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And the last question that we'll have for today is, how do I get my money if I win a case? Is it from the court?
Yes. The simple answer is yes. As I mentioned in the enforcement part, the courts, once you have a ruling, will enforce your judgment. So how it works, just to keep it brief, is the courts generally will contact the government departments, the RTA, or the vehicle registry, the DED, the Dubai Economic Department, or other economic departments, that the company registrar, and simply put, the banks for any bank accounts and all that. So any bank accounts, any assets of the respondent or the person being sued, will be contacted by the courts, and who will either block his assets and then eventually auction it and sell it. So the enforcement system in the UAE is very good, and you will be able to get your money, most likely, unless the person is bankrupt.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, and that's the end of the questions.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. It was very interesting. I hope you've benefited from today. We're going to close the session now. We have another 9 days of presentations from various people that we hope that you will attend and you will benefit from. Thank you. Have a good day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.